large hall of the Institute itself, behind Crown Square, which is the Trafalgar Square of Hanbridge. The Countess was to drive over from Sneyd. Had the epoch been 10 years later, she would have motored over, but probably that would not have made any difference to what happened. In relating what did happen, I confine myself to facts, eschewing imputations. It is a truism that life is full of coincidences, but whether these events comprised a coincidence or not, each reader must decide for himself, according to his cynicism or his faith in human nature. The facts are: first, that Denry called one day at the house of Mrs. Kemp, a little lower down Broome Street, Mrs. Kemp being friendly with Mrs. Machin and the mother of Jock, the Countess's carriage footman, whom Denry had known from boyhood. Second, that a few days later, when Jock came over to see his mother, Denry was present, and that subsequently Denry and Jock went for a stroll together in the cemetery, the principal resort of strollers in Bursley. Third, that on the afternoon of the opening ceremony the Countess's carriage broke down in Sneyd Vale, 2 miles from Sneyd and 3 miles from Hanbridge. Fourth, that 5 minutes later Denry, in all his best clothes, drove up behind his mule. Fifth, that Denry drove right past the breakdown, apparently not noticing it. Sixth, that Jock, touching his hat to Denry as if to a stranger, for, of course, while on duty a footman must be dead to all humanities, said, "Excuse me, sir," and so caused Denry to stop. These are the simple facts. Denry looked round, with that careless half turn of the upper part of the body which drivers of elegant equipages affect when their attention is called to something trifling behind them. The mule also looked round. It was a habit of the mule's, and if the dog had been there, the dog would have shown an even livelier inquisitiveness. But Denry had left the faithful animal at home. "Good afternoon, Countess," he said, raising his hat, and trying to express surprise, pleasure, and imperturbability all at once. The Countess of Chell, who was standing in the road, raised her lorgnon, which was attached to the end of a tortoiseshell pole about a foot long, and regarded Denry. This lorgnon was a new device of hers, and it was already having the happy effect of increasing the sale of long-handled lorgnons throughout the Five Towns. "Oh, it's you, is it?" said the Countess. "I see you've grown a beard." It was just this easy familiarity that endeared her to the district. As observant people put it, you never knew what she would say next, and yet she never compromised her dignity. "Yes," said Denry. "Have you had an accident?" "No," said the Countess bitterly. "I'm doing this for idle amusement." The horses had been taken out, and were grazing by the roadside like common horses. The coachman was dipping his skirts in the mud as he bent down in front of the carriage and twisted the pole to and fro and round about and round about. The footman, Jock, was industriously watching him. "It's the pole pin, sir," said Jock. Denry descended from his own hammercloth. The Countess was not smiling. It was the first time that Denry had seen her without an efficient smile on her face. "Have you got to be anywhere particular?" he asked. Many ladies would not have understood what he meant, but the Countess was used to the Five Towns. "Yes," said she, "I've got to be somewhere particular. I've got to be at the Police Institute at 3 o'clock particular, Mr. Machin, and I shan't be. I'm late now. We've been here 10 minutes." The Countess was rather too often late for public ceremonies. Nobody informed her of the fact. Everybody, on the contrary, assiduously pretended that she had arrived at the very second. But she was well aware that she had a reputation for unpunctuality. Ordinarily, being too hurried to invent a really clever excuse, she would assert lightly that something had happened to her carriage. And now something in truth had happened to her carriage. But who would believe it in the Police Institute? "If you'll come with me, I'll guarantee to get you there by 3 o'clock," said Denry. The road thereabouts was lonely. A canal ran parallel with it at a distance of 50 yards, and on the canal the boat was moving in the direction of Hanbridge at the rate of a mile an hour. Such was the only other vehicle in sight. The outskirts of Knype, the nearest town, did not begin until at least a mile further on, and the Countess, dressed for the undoing of mayors and other unimpressionable functionaries, could not possibly have walked even half a mile in that rich dark mud. She thanked him, and without a word to her servants, took the seat beside him. 3. Immediately the mule began to trot, the Countess began to smile again. Relief and content were painted upon her handsome features. Denry soon learnt that she knew all about mules, or almost all. She told him how she had ridden hundreds of miles on mules in the Apennines, where there were no roads, and only mules, goats, and flies could keep their feet on the steep, stony paths. She said that a good mule was worth £40 in the Apennines, more than a horse of similar quality. In fact, she was very sympathetic about mules. Denry saw that he must drive with as much style as possible, and he tried to remember all that he had picked up from a book concerning the proper manner of holding the reins. For in everything that appertained to riding and driving, the Countess was an expert. In the season she hunted once or twice a week with the North Staffordshire hounds, and the Signal had stated that she was a fearless horsewoman. It made this statement one day when she had been thrown and carried to Sneyd senseless. The mule, too, seemingly conscious of its responsibilities and its high destiny, put its best foot foremost, and behaved in general like a mule that knew the name of its great-grandfather. It went through Knype in admirable style, not swerving at the steam cars, nor exciting itself about the railway bridge. A photographer who stood at his door manoeuvring a large camera startled it momentarily, until it remembered that it had seen a camera before. The Countess, who wondered why on earth a photographer should be capering round a tripod in a doorway, turned to inspect the man with her lorgnon. They were now coursing up the Cauldon Bank towards Hanbridge. They were already within the boundaries of Hanbridge, and a pedestrian here and there recognised the Countess. You can hide nothing from the quidnunc of Hanbridge. Moreover, when a quidnunc in the streets of Hanbridge sees somebody famous or striking or notorious, he does not pretend that he has seen nobody. He points unmistakably to what he has observed, if he has a companion, and if he has no companion, he stands still and stares with such honest intensity that the entire street stands and stares too. Occasionally you may see an entire street standing and staring, without any idea of what it is staring at. As the equipage dashingly approached the busy centre of Hanbridge, the region of fine shops, public houses, hotels, halls, and theatres, more and more of the inhabitants knew that Iris, as they affectionately called her, was driving with a young man in a tumble-down little victoria behind a mule whose ears flapped like an elephant's. Denry being far less renowned in Hanbridge than in his native Bursley, few persons recognised him. After the victoria had gone by, people who had heard the news too late rushed from shops and gazed at the Countess's back as at a fading dream, until the insistent clang of a car bell made them jump again to the footpath. At length Denry and the Countess could see the clock of the old town hall in Crown Square, and it was 3:15. They were less than a minute off the Institute. "There you are," said Denry proudly. 3 miles if it's a yard, in 17 minutes. For a mule it's none so dusty." And such was the Countess's knowledge of the language of the Five Towns that she instantly divined the meaning of even that phrase, "none so dusty." They swept into Crown Square grandly. And then, with no warning, the mule suddenly applied all the automatic brakes which a mule has, and stopped. "Oh, Lor!" sighed Denry. He knew the cause of that arresting. A large squad of policemen, a perfect regiment of policemen, was moving across the north side of the square in the direction of the Institute. Nothing could have seemed more reassuring, less harmful than that band of policemen, off duty for the afternoon and collected together for the purpose of giving a hearty and policemanly welcome to their benefactress the Countess. But the mule had his own views about policemen. In the early days of Denry's ownership of him, he had nearly always shied at the spectacle of a policeman. He would tolerate steam-rollers and even falling kites, but a policeman had ever been antipathetic to him. Denry, by patience and punishment, had gradually brought him round almost to the Countess's view of policemen, namely, that they were a courteous and trustworthy body of public servants, not to be treated as scarecrows or the dregs of society. At any rate, the mule had of late months practically ceased to set his face against the policing of the Five Towns, and when he was on his best behaviour he would ignore a policeman completely.